Hello and welcome to Think Between the Lines. The idea is simple. If you don't believe in God, how do you explain right and wrong? This was one of the first philosophical arguments I ever heard, and I still think it's a good one. But I've also been working on a new way of presenting the idea to more modern listeners. Let's dig into it.
Think between the lines.
I'm planning on making a whole separate video explaining why I believe we need a new presentation of this argument, but for now, let's just walk through the steps. Let's start by looking back to 250 years ago, when 13 rebellious British colonies were preparing to break away from England. In their Declaration of Independence, they set out their justification for their rebellion. This is what they wrote. "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights." I want to draw our attention to four key words here. That we are created, that we are equal, or at least equal before the law, that we have basic human rights, and that we were given those by our Creator. From this sentence, the Founding Fathers went on to develop a whole philosophy of human freedom based on these fundamental ideas. But as important as these ideas were, the revolution was also about religious liberty. America was going to be a pluralistic society, so everybody quickly agreed that the important thing, at least when it came to government and society, was that you believed in equality and human rights. It really didn't matter where you believed they came from. You could be a judge or a senator or even the President of the United States, and it didn't matter what you thought about God as long as you believed in equality and human rights. And that's worked out perfectly fine ever since. But this is where the moral argument picks things up. The question is, if you believe in equality and human rights, what basis other than God explains them? One natural suggestion is that evolution could be the source of these values. And if we evolved from other social primates, we certainly could have inherited instincts that would foster cooperation and empathy. But there's a problem. In this scenario, these values are just tricks that evolution is playing on us to promote survival. Basically, we think people deserve to be treated as equals because acting that way helped our ancestors survive. And that's why this answer doesn't really work. Because if all our feelings of equality arose from the struggle for survival, then we should be able to just ignore those feelings whenever it's convenient. But in reality, it's exactly when the values of equality become inconvenient that we actually feel like it is most important to stick to them. If our belief in human rights is merely an evolutionary holdover, then we should be evolved enough by now to see through it and to ignore it when we want to. But the evolution idea has another flaw. Evolution hasn't just endowed us with empathy, but also all kinds of different drives and emotions. So we have a drive for selfishness and a drive for cooperation. When two drives are in conflict, how do we decide which one to obey? If they both came from the same source, it's hard to say why we prioritize one over another. Another theory for grounding these values is that we are all part of a social contract, and that society works best for everyone when we all respect one another's rights. But a system like that only works if you already want a society that benefits everybody equally. If you're one of the privileged few who's benefiting from the inequality in the system, you have less motivation to push for equality. In that case, it might be the right thing for you to try to hold on to power as long as possible. Or what about when you find a chance to get ahead at the expense of others, and you could know for sure that they would never find out? Shouldn't you break the social contract if you'll never get caught? Again, it seems like this grounding doesn't quite work. So just about everybody values equality and human rights. But the moral argument challenges us to take a step back and ask ourselves why we put so much importance on these ideas. If we're really willing to protest and advocate and even go to war over these principles, isn't it also worth taking the time to consider their source? And what if we find out that, in the end, God is the only possible grounding? In that case, we have a choice to make. Either we take another look at the evidence for God, or we admit that our most cherished ideals are just an illusion.